The Eternal Monuments. Imagine standing in the Egyptian desert at dawn, when the air is still cool and the light is soft and golden. Before you stretches a landscape of sand and low stone, ancient and silent beneath an enormous sky. In the distance, shapes begin to emerge from the haze, triangular forms rising above the plateau, their surfaces catching the early light. These are the pyramids of Egypt, some of the most enduring monuments ever built by human hands. For nearly 5,000 years, these structures have stood, silent witnesses to the rise and fall of dynasties, the flow of the Nile, and the endless turning of seasons. They were built not as palaces or temples for the living, but as eternal resting places for pharaohs, monuments designed to last forever in the dry desert heat. Your journey over the next 4 hours will trace the story of these pyramids, why they were built, how they were constructed, who built them, and what they reveal about ancient Egyptian civilization, belief, and achievement. You will learn not only about the famous pyramids near Giza, but about pyramids scattered across Egypt from north to south, each one a chapter in a story that spans more than 2,000 years. As the sun rises higher, its warmth begins to reach you, and you settle into the calm, patient rhythm of this journey through pyramid history and the world that created them.
The concept of eternity. Why pharaohs built pyramids. To understand why the pharaohs invested such enormous resources in pyramid construction, we must understand how ancient Egyptians viewed death and the afterlife. For the Egyptian people, death was not an ending, but a transition. They believed that a person possessed several spiritual aspects or souls, the IB or heart, which held memory and personality, the Ka, a life force that continued after death, and the Ba, sometimes compared to a soul or spirit. When a person died, these aspects needed to continue existing in some form. The living world and the afterlife were not completely separate realms, but interconnected, with the living maintaining relationships with the dead through offerings and rituals. The body itself was considered essential. The Egyptians believed that the Ba and Ka needed a physical anchor, a place to return to and recognize. This is why the practice of mummification developed, to preserve the body so that it could serve as a permanent home for the spiritual aspects of the deceased. The pharaoh, being divine or semi-divine, faced an even more crucial transition. His afterlife was not just a personal concern, it was a cosmic necessity. The Egyptians believed that the pharaoh, after death, would undergo a spiritual journey, sailing across the sky with the sun god Ra during the day and traveling through the underworld at night.
For this journey to be successful, the pharaoh needed proper preparation, proper burial,
and a monument that would ensure his name and memory endured forever. The pyramid served all these purposes. It was a tomb, protecting the royal body and all the goods placed within it. It was a temple, a place where priests could perform rituals and make offerings to sustain the dead king. It was a monument, a massive structure that announced to the world the power, importance, and eternal nature of the pharaoh. The shape itself held meaning. The pyramid's form, with its triangular sides meeting at a point toward the heavens, symbolized the primordial mound that emerged from the waters of creation in Egyptian mythology. It was a cosmic symbol as much as an architectural form. By building a pyramid, a pharaoh was not simply creating a tomb. He was constructing a permanent physical manifestation of his divine status, his connection to the gods, and his hope for eternal existence. The investment required was staggering. A major pyramid consumed resources equivalent to perhaps 10 to 20% of a nation's annual production. Yet Egyptian rulers believed this expense was justified, necessary even, for ensuring their continued existence in the afterlife and maintaining cosmic order. This fundamental belief that death was not final, that the spiritual world continued, and that the pharaoh's eternal life was essential to the functioning of the universe, drove the pyramid-building phenomenon that would define Egyptian civilization for centuries.
The evolution of pyramids, from mastabas to the true pyramid. Before the pyramids as we know them emerged, Egyptian tombs took different forms. In the early dynastic period, around 3100 BCE and following centuries, royal tombs were often built underground, cut into the bedrock, and covered with a low, flat-topped structure called a mastaba. The word mastaba comes from Arabic, meaning bench, because these low rectangular structures resembled the mud benches found outside Egyptian houses. Mastabas were built to protect the tomb beneath and to provide space for the performance of rituals and the presentation of offerings. They often contained elaborate internal chambers and passages, though the overall effect was one of solidity and permanence rather than grandeur. This changed during the Third Dynasty, around 2670 BCE, when a revolutionary figure emerged, an architect named Imhotep, who served the pharaoh Djoser. Imhotep conceived of a novel idea, stacking multiple mastabas on top of one another, each one slightly smaller than the one below, creating a stepped pyramid. This structure, built at Saqqara near modern Cairo, rises in 6 enormous steps, reaching a height of approximately 62 meters, making it taller than any previously constructed building in the world. The step pyramid, as it is called, was revolutionary not only in its appearance, but in its materials and construction. Previous monumental structures had been built of mud brick or stone blocks of limited size. Imhotep directed the quarrying, transport, and precise placement of enormous blocks of limestone, demonstrating a level of engineering control that had not been attempted before.
The stepped pyramid served multiple purposes within the broader temple complex that surrounded it. Below ground lay the burial chamber, where the pharaoh's body rested, protected by stone blocks and passages. Above ground were courtyards, halls, and passages where rituals could be performed and the pharaoh's continuing existence could be maintained through offerings and prayers. Imhotep's achievement was transformative, and he was remembered for it centuries later, eventually being deified and honored as a god of medicine, wisdom, and architecture. The step pyramid inspired similar structures built by Djoser's successors, including pyramids at Meidum and Abu Rawash. Each builder sought to create something larger and more impressive than his predecessors. However, these early step pyramids were somewhat unstable architecturally. Their steep sides and stacked design created internal stresses that could lead to cracking and collapse if not carefully managed. The evolution toward the smooth-sided true pyramid came during the 4th dynasty, particularly under the pharaoh Khufu. The transition is visible at Meidum, where a pyramid begun under one pharaoh and completed under another shows clear changes in design. The stepped sides were filled in with additional stone blocks to create smooth, slanting surfaces. This transformation was structural, aesthetic, and symbolic, creating the classic pyramid form that dominates popular imagination.
By the time of Khufu's reign, around 2589 to 2566 BCE, the technology and knowledge necessary to build the Great Pyramid of Giza had been fully developed. This pyramid would become the largest and most famous of all Egyptian pyramids, a monument so impressive that it would remain the tallest human-made structure on Earth until the Middle Ages. The evolution from mastaba to step pyramid to true pyramid represents not merely a change in fashion, but a deepening understanding of engineering principles, structural stability, and the aesthetic possibilities of stone construction.
The Great Pyramids of Giza, the zenith of pyramid construction. On the Giza Plateau, on the outskirts of modern Cairo, 3 pyramids stand in a row: the pyramids of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. These 3 monuments, built over several decades during the 4th dynasty, represent the absolute peak of pyramid construction, the moment when Egyptian builders achieved maximum scale and precision. The Great Pyramid of Khufu is the largest and most famous. When completed, it stood approximately 146 meters tall, a height that would not be surpassed by human-made structures for nearly 4,000 years, until the construction of medieval European cathedrals. The base of the Great Pyramid covers an enormous area. Each side measures approximately 230 meters in length, making the base nearly as large as 15 modern football fields combined. The precision of the construction is staggering. The sides are aligned to the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, with a precision of within a fraction of a degree, accomplished without benefit of modern surveying instruments. The base is nearly perfectly level, with variations of only a few centimeters across its entire expanse. The pyramid is composed of approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing between 2.5 and 15 tons, with some of the blocks in the interior chambers weighing much more. These blocks were quarried at sites near Giza and also transported from quarries far to the south, some blocks traveling more than 800 kilometers to reach the building site. The interior of the Great Pyramid is equally remarkable. Passages and chambers wind through the structure, including the King's Chamber, which contains a granite sarcophagus that once held the pharaoh's body. Shafts penetrate the pyramid, their purposes still debated by scholars, but possibly serving religious, structural, or ventilation functions.
The precision of the internal chambers is as impressive as the external construction. The King's Chamber is lined with granite blocks fitted with such care that a knife blade cannot be inserted between them. The ceiling incorporates relieving chambers, spaces above the main chamber filled with granite blocks that distribute weight and protect the chamber below from the pressure of millions of tons of stone overhead. The construction of the Great Pyramid required coordination on an almost unimaginable scale. Modern engineers estimate that the pyramid consumed the labor of perhaps 100,000 workers over the course of 20 years or more. These workers were not slaves as once commonly assumed. Recent archaeological evidence, including workers' villages discovered near the pyramids, shows that the builders were paid laborers conscripted from across Egypt for rotating periods of service. Workers were organized into crews with names like Friends of Khufu, organized under overseers and supervisors. They were provided with housing, food, and medical care, including treatment for injuries sustained during construction. The organization required to feed, house, and coordinate such a workforce was itself a remarkable achievement, demonstrating Egypt's administrative capacity and resource control. The pyramid was built using copper tools, stone hammers, and wooden levers and sledges. There were no metal pulleys, no wheels, no draft animals specifically trained for this purpose, and certainly no machines powered by anything other than human muscle.
Yet, despite these limitations, workers were able to move blocks weighing up to 15 tons, position them with precision, and create a structure that has endured for 46 centuries. Methods of construction likely involved quarrying blocks using stone tools and possibly wooden wedges that were wet to cause expansion. Blocks were then moved on sledges, either dragged directly across sand or moved on wooden rollers. Water or sand mixed with water was probably used to reduce friction. Blocks were raised using ramps, possibly straight ramps or spiral ramps, constructed of mud brick and stone rubble. Workers used levers and mechanical advantage to position blocks once they reached the desired height. The construction proceeded systematically, likely in stages, with different teams handling quarrying, transport, and placement. The pyramid grew upward and inward, layer by layer, over years that probably averaged the placement of hundreds of blocks per day. When complete, the pyramid was covered in Tura limestone, a fine white stone that reflected sunlight, making the pyramid gleam brilliantly against the desert sky. Only portions of this casing remain today,
visible on parts of the Pyramid of Khafre, but mostly stripped away over centuries to be used for other construction projects. The Pyramid of Khafre, Khufu's successor, was slightly smaller but still impressive, measuring approximately 214 meters on each side. The Pyramid of Menkaure, the third large pyramid at Giza, was smaller still, perhaps 105 meters to a side, reflecting perhaps a shift in priorities or available resources. Around each pyramid stretched a complex of smaller structures. A mortuary temple on the east side served as a place where priests performed rituals for the deceased pharaoh. A causeway connected the mortuary temple to a valley temple near the Nile, allowing processions to ascend from the river toward the pyramid.
In a smaller subsidiary pyramids, perhaps serving ceremonial functions or housing the burials of royal family members, were erected nearby. Mastabas of nobles and officials clustered around the Great Pyramids, each seeking proximity to royal power and protection. The entire Giza complex functioned as a vast necropolis, a city of the dead designed with careful planning and unified in purpose. From above, the arrangement of pyramids, temples, and subsidiary structures would have expressed an ordered vision of the cosmos, with the Great Pyramids as central anchors.
The Pyramids of the Old Kingdom, regional variations. While the Giza pyramids are the most famous, numerous other pyramids were built across Egypt during the Old Kingdom and beyond, each expressing the ambitions and resources of its builder. At Saqqara, in addition to Djoser's Step Pyramid, numerous other pyramids were built by successive pharaohs. The Pyramid of Unas, a 5th dynasty pharaoh, is notable for containing the pyramid texts, a collection of religious inscriptions and spells meant to guide the pharaoh through the afterlife. These texts, carved on the interior walls of the pyramid, represent some of the oldest written religious literature in the world, preserved because they were carved into stone within burial chambers that protected them from decay. At Abusir, pyramids of 5th dynasty pharaohs show a gradual evolution and, in some cases, decline in size compared to 4th dynasty monuments. Some scholars interpret this as evidence that the enormous resources devoted to pyramid construction were becoming unsustainable, contributing to shifts in how later pharaohs allocated their resources. The Pyramid of Pepi II at Saqqara dates to the 6th dynasty and represents one of the last great pyramids of the Old Kingdom. After the 6th dynasty, pyramid construction continues, but generally on a smaller scale, reflecting perhaps reduced royal power or shifted priorities. The Middle Kingdom, which follows the Old Kingdom, sees a revival of pyramid building, though the pyramids of this period are generally smaller than their Old Kingdom predecessors.
At Dahshur, the pyramids of Amenemhat III showcase sophisticated internal design, with multiple passages and chambers arranged in intricate patterns. The materials used change as well. While Old Kingdom pyramids are built primarily of limestone, Middle Kingdom pyramids often feature a core of mud brick faced with stone. This approach was more economical, but ultimately less durable. Many Middle Kingdom pyramids have largely collapsed, their mud brick cores having disintegrated over centuries. The New Kingdom, when Egypt becomes a major imperial power, largely abandons pyramid construction in favor of rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings. These tombs, cut deep into the cliff faces of the western bank of the Nile, offered better security against tomb robbery than freestanding pyramids. However, the legacy of the pyramid continues to influence Egyptian thought and architecture throughout the later periods and even beyond, in the memory and imagination of later peoples who regarded pyramids as eternal monuments to vanished power and knowledge.
The labor force. Who built the pyramids and how they worked? The construction of the pyramids represents one of the largest coordinated labor efforts of the ancient world. Understanding who performed this work and how they were organized provides insight into the scale and sophistication of Old Kingdom Egypt. Recent archaeological evidence, particularly from workers' villages discovered near the Giza pyramids, has overturned older assumptions about pyramid construction. For centuries, popular belief held that slaves, possibly including Hebrew slaves mentioned in biblical texts, built the pyramids through brutal forced labor. However, archaeological investigations have revealed a different picture. The workers were conscripted laborers drawn from throughout Egypt. They were organized into rotating crews, serving for specific periods before returning to their homes and farms. This system allowed the pharaoh to command labor without permanently removing vast numbers of people from agricultural production. The workers' villages near Giza provide remarkable evidence of how the pyramid builders lived. Excavations have revealed bakeries where bread was prepared, suggesting that workers received regular rations of food. Medical care was available, as evidenced by skeletons showing evidence of injuries that were treated and healed, or occasionally infected wounds that led to amputation.
The skeletal remains of workers often show wear and strain consistent with heavy physical labor. Some show damage to the spine from carrying heavy loads, arthritis from repetitive motion, and healed fractures from accidents. Yet the fact that many injuries healed successfully suggests that workers received basic medical attention and were not simply discarded after injury. Crews had names such as Friends of Khufu and were organized hierarchically with overseers, foremen, and work teams. Graffiti found within the pyramid itself, sometimes marking crew names, suggests that workers took pride in their accomplishment and that their contributions were recognized. The work was seasonal. During the inundation period, when the Nile flooded and agricultural work was impossible, labor could be devoted to pyramid construction. This timing was economical, allowing workers to return to essential farming during the planting and harvesting seasons. The quarrying of stone required significant expertise and dangerous work. Workers used stone tools and possibly copper chisels to cut and shape blocks. Stone hammers struck chisels or wedges to separate blocks from the living rock. Wooden wedges were driven into cracks, and water was sometimes applied to cause the wood to expand, splitting the stone further.
The transport of blocks required enormous coordination and ingenuity. Blocks were first moved short distances on wooden sledges, probably pulled directly across sand or sand mixed with water to reduce friction. Over longer distances, blocks may have been transported on wooden rollers,
a system that reduced friction by allowing the block to roll rather than slide. Some evidence suggests that wooden tracks or temporary roads may have been constructed to facilitate transport. Moving a 15-ton block required careful coordination of perhaps 200 to 300 workers pulling in unison. Chants or songs may have helped synchronize effort, a practice documented in later periods and likely used during pyramid construction. The raising of blocks to higher levels of the pyramid required ramps. The exact configuration of these ramps remains debated. Possibilities include straight ramps, spiral ramps, or systems of ramps that were extended as the pyramid grew. The gradient of ramps could not be too steep, or pulling blocks upward would become impractical. A gradient of about 5 to 10% was likely used, requiring ramps that extended far out from the pyramid or that rose in stages. Once a block reached its intended height, it was positioned using levers and the efforts of workers who guided and positioned it in place. The precision required, fitting blocks tightly enough that mortar is barely visible, suggests considerable skill and experience among the workers and overseers.
Feeding this vast workforce was a significant logistical challenge. The bakeries near the workers' villages suggest that grain was supplied from state reserves and converted into bread, the staple of the Egyptian diet. Fish from the Nile and other provisions completed the diet. The labor itself, despite its scale, was probably not perceived as oppressive in the way modern minds might imagine. Work on the pharaoh's monument was seen as a religious and patriotic duty, something in which the entire nation participated in support of the divine king. Many workers probably took pride in their contribution to an eternal monument. The massive undertaking demonstrated the power of the state to organize labor, the loyalty of subjects to their pharaoh, and the shared belief that this work served purposes that transcended individual lives and concerns.
Religious beliefs and the pyramid texts. The pyramids are not merely tombs or monuments. They are expressions of deep religious beliefs about the nature of the divine, the afterlife, and the cosmos. Within the pyramids, particularly from the 5th dynasty onward, texts were carved on interior walls, providing insight into the religious thought that drove pyramid construction. The pyramid texts, as these inscriptions are called, represent some of the oldest religious literature known to humanity. They describe the journey of the pharaoh after death, the challenges he would face, the spells and utterances that would help him, and the gods he would encounter. One central element of the pyramid texts is the concept of the pharaoh's resurrection or transformation. The texts describe the pharaoh ascending to the heavens, becoming a star, or sailing with the sun god Ra and his solar bark, or boat. The journey of Ra serves as a model for the pharaoh's own journey. Ra travels across the sky during the day, bringing light and order to the world. At night, he descends into the underworld, called the Duat, where he encounters various demons and obstacles. By understanding and reciting the spells and names in the pyramid texts, the pharaoh could navigate this journey successfully, identify himself with Ra or with other powerful deities, and ultimately be reborn. Another important concept is that of Ma'at, often translated as truth, justice, or cosmic order. Ma'at is represented as a goddess and as a principle governing the universe. The pharaoh's role in life is to maintain Ma'at. His role after death is to continue supporting cosmic order through his existence in the afterlife. The texts also mention various gods and their roles. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, is associated with mummification and the afterlife. Osiris, the god of the underworld and fertility, is sometimes identified with the deceased pharaoh. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing, is invoked for knowledge and understanding.
The pyramid itself is a cosmological structure, its shape reflecting mythological and astronomical concepts. The apex reaches toward the heavens, oriented to the circumpolar stars that never set, representing eternal, unchanging heaven. The base rests firmly on the earth. Internal chambers and passages may have had symbolic meanings related to different aspects of the cosmos or the afterlife journey. The movement from the burial chamber upward through passages and shafts could represent the ascent of the pharaoh's soul toward the heavens. The religious beliefs expressed in the pyramids and their texts reveal a civilization deeply concerned with transcendence, eternity, and the connection between the earthly and the divine realms. For the ancient Egyptians, the pyramids were not merely monuments to vanity or displays of power. They were physical manifestations of religious convictions about the immortality of the soul and the eternal nature of the divine order.
Quarrying, transport, and the engineering challenge of pyramid construction cannot be overstated. Every stone had to be quarried, shaped, transported, and positioned with precision. The entire process, from initial conception to final completion, required planning, mathematics, and problem solving on a scale that was revolutionary for its time. The limestone blocks that form the bulk of Egyptian pyramids came from quarries near Giza and Saqqara, reducing transport distance. However, the white Tura limestone used as facing stones came from quarries on the east bank of the Nile, requiring transport across the river. Granite, used for internal chambers and decorative elements, came from Aswan, far to the south, requiring transport of approximately 800 kilometers. This transport involved moving blocks on boats along the Nile, no small feat even with a river as convenient as Egypt's. The quarrying process itself was labor-intensive. Workers first had to identify suitable stone, free from major flaws or cracks that would compromise structural integrity. Then, the stone had to be separated from the surrounding bedrock and shaped into usable blocks. The primary tools were stone hammers, copper chisels, and wooden wedges. The stone hammer, made from dolerite, a very hard stone, was used to strike copper chisels or to drive wooden wedges into cracks. Copper, while softer than stone, has the advantage that it can be reshaped and reused repeatedly without shattering, unlike stone tools. A copper chisel struck against limestone can create a groove. Repeated blows along a line create a trench that weakens the stones sufficiently for separation.
Wooden wedges were driven into cracks and fissures. When water was applied to the wood, it swelled, exerting immense pressure that widened the crack until the stones split. Once a block was separated, it was roughly squared to make it more transportable, though final shaping might occur after transport. The transport of blocks over land to the Nile required a system of sledges and ramps. Wooden sledges, constructed from planks lashed together with rope, could support the weight of a block, though the friction of the sledge on sand required considerable force to move the block. The application of water or sand mixed with water significantly reduced friction. A wet sand surface or a surface of sand slurry allowed the sledge to move with far less force than would be required on dry sand. This simple but effective technique, documented in Middle Kingdom tomb scenes, could reduce the force required by as much as half, making the movement of large blocks feasible. Over longer distances or where terrain was uneven, wooden rollers may have been used, allowing the block to roll rather than slide, further reducing friction. Once blocks reached the Nile, they were loaded onto wooden boats for transport. The Nile's current flowed north, making downstream transport relatively easy. Returning upstream required either poling or rowing, or waiting for the annual flood to reverse the current temporarily. The construction site itself required preparation. The ground had to be leveled and a baseline established to ensure that the pyramid's sides would be properly aligned. The precision with which the Giza pyramids are aligned to the cardinal directions suggests the use of astronomical observation or surveying techniques based on shadow observation or star positions.
The ancient Egyptians were sophisticated in their mathematical and observational knowledge, and their ability to establish this precision is a testament to that sophistication. Ramps had to be constructed as the pyramid rose. The complexity of ramp systems has been much debated by modern scholars. Some propose straight ramps extending from the base, others suggest spiral ramps, and still others propose systems where ramps were extended outward and then refigured as the pyramid grew. The gradient of any ramp had to be manageable. Too steep, and blocks could not be moved upward. A gradient of about 5 degrees to 10 degrees was probably used, requiring ramps of considerable length for taller pyramids. The amount of material required for ramps themselves was substantial, but these ramps were likely dismantled and reused or allowed to crumble as construction progressed, so they left no permanent archaeological trace. The precision with which blocks were positioned is remarkable. Many blocks fit together so tightly that a knife blade cannot be inserted between them, despite the absence of mortar. The joints between blocks are remarkably straight and even, suggesting careful measurement and positioning. This precision was achieved using basic tools: wooden squares, levels, straight edges, and measuring ropes. Workers could sight along edges, use plumb bobs to verify vertical alignment, and measure using knotted ropes marked at standard intervals. The Egyptian cubit, a unit of measurement approximately 52.4 centimeters long, was used for measurement.
This standardized unit allowed consistent measurement across the entire project, important for ensuring that blocks from different quarries would fit together properly. The engineering problem of building a structure this large required not only the solution of individual technical challenges, but also the integration of many different processes into a coordinated system. Quarrying had to be synchronized with transport. Transport had to be timed with construction. Construction had to follow a plan that ensured structural integrity and appropriate completion. The organization required to manage this integration was itself a remarkable achievement, suggesting that Old Kingdom Egypt possessed sophisticated project management capabilities.
The decline of pyramid building and shifts in royal burial. The Fourth Dynasty, which produced the Great Pyramids of Giza, represents the peak of pyramid construction. The pyramids of the Fifth Dynasty, which followed, show a gradual decline in size and a shift in resources. The Pyramid of Unas, a Fifth Dynasty pharaoh, measures only about 57 meters on each side, far smaller than the Great Pyramids of a century before. Yet, despite its smaller scale, the Pyramid of Unas contains the first known pyramid texts, suggesting that, although the structures themselves grew smaller, the religious and textual content became more elaborate. The reasons for this shift remain debated among scholars. One possibility is that the enormous resources devoted to pyramid construction under Khufu and his immediate successors became unsustainable. Supporting a labor force of 100,000 people for 20 years or more would strain any nation's economy and agricultural production. Another possibility is that the power and authority of the pharaoh began to decentralize, with provincial nobles gaining more autonomy and controlling more resources. If nobles no longer felt obligated to divert their resources entirely to royal monument building, then the pharaoh's ability to command massive projects would be correspondingly reduced. By the Sixth Dynasty, the last dynasty of the Old Kingdom, pyramids continued to be built but remained relatively small. The period following the Old Kingdom, the First Intermediate Period, saw political fragmentation and a reduction in large-scale royal building projects across the entire country.
The Middle Kingdom, which followed, saw a revival of pyramid building, but the pyramids of this period were smaller than their Old Kingdom predecessors, and often built with cores of mud brick rather than solid stone. This change reflected both practical and ideological shifts in how the Middle Kingdom approached royal burial and commemoration. By the New Kingdom, the era of pyramid building as the primary form of royal burial had ended. The 18th dynasty pharaohs, including Tutankhamun and Ramesses II, were buried instead in rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings, cut into cliffs on the western bank of the Nile. The shift to rock-cut tombs may have been motivated partly by security concerns. The Great Pyramids were obvious targets for tomb robbers, and despite precautions, many were successfully looted. A hidden tomb cut into a cliff, disguised and concealed, offered better protection for the royal burial and its contents. The New Kingdom maintained the tradition of extensive burial texts and ritual equipment, but expressed these through painted scenes and inscriptions on tomb walls, rather than through the massive architecture of pyramids. Yet the pyramids themselves remained powerful symbols throughout Egyptian history. Later pharaohs, when they did build pyramids, were consciously imitating and referencing the great monuments of the Old Kingdom. Greek and Roman visitors to Egypt were awed by the pyramids and wrote accounts of them that have survived to the present day. These accounts, combined with the physical survival of the structures themselves, ensured that the pyramids would become known throughout the Mediterranean world and eventually to all of human civilization. The shift from pyramid burial to other forms of royal commemoration reflects changing beliefs, changing political structures, and changing practical considerations. Yet the pyramids, standing immobile through all these changes, continued to assert their authority and magnificence, shaping how later ages understood and remembered ancient Egypt.
Pyramids, despite precautions, were not immune to tomb robbery. From ancient times, people have been drawn to the pyramids, seeking the treasures believed to be buried within. The loss of contents from the pyramids occurred over centuries through various means. Some robberies occurred when the pyramids were still new and the locations of chambers and passages could be remembered or discovered. Other robberies occurred later, when crumbling masonry provided access points and when the location of chambers had been lost to time. The builders of the pyramids were aware of the threat of robbery and implemented various security measures. Passages were blocked with granite plugs and slabs, designed to be difficult to move and to conceal further passages behind them. False passages led to dead ends, potentially confusing intruders. The burial chamber itself, the sarcophagus that held the royal body, was often left behind because of its immense size and weight, making it impractical to remove. The bodies of pharaohs may have been removed from the pyramids and preserved or destroyed by ancient robbers seeking to prevent the pharaoh's continued existence in the afterlife, though this remains uncertain. In the ancient and medieval Islamic periods, many pyramids were used as convenient sources of stone for construction projects. The uniform blocks of limestone could be easily extracted and repurposed, leading to significant damage to pyramid structures. The Great Pyramid at Giza, for example, once had a facing of white Tura limestone covering its exterior. Most of this facing was removed in the 14th and 15th centuries CE and used to build the city of Cairo.
Modern exploration and study of the pyramids began with European travelers and Egyptologists in the 18th and 19th centuries. Figures such as Giovanni Battista Belzoni made significant discoveries within pyramids, though by modern standards, their methods were destructive, often focusing on treasure rather than systematic archaeological study. By the 20th century, more scientific approaches to pyramid study developed. Archaeologists focused on understanding the construction methods, the history of the structures, and the religious beliefs they embodied, rather than merely seeking treasures. The excavation of workers' villages near the Giza pyramids, conducted in recent decades, has revolutionized understanding of who built the pyramids and how the work was organized. This work has revealed far more about the mechanics of pyramid construction than any study of the pyramids themselves could have done. In recent years, advanced techniques such as X-ray diffraction, thermography, and muon imaging have been applied to pyramid study, revealing details of internal structure without requiring invasive excavation. In 2017, muon imaging detected previously unknown voids within the Great Pyramid of Khufu, demonstrating that even after centuries of study, mysteries remain. The pyramids continue to attract interest from scholars, tourists, and unfortunately, looters and vandals. Their preservation is an ongoing concern, requiring efforts to protect them from environmental degradation and human damage.
The legacy of the pyramids, why they continue to fascinate. The pyramids of Egypt have stood for nearly 5,000 years, longer than any other large human-made structures. Their durability is remarkable, the result of careful construction and the dry Egyptian climate that has preserved them from decay. Yet the pyramids' lasting significance goes far beyond their physical durability. They represent an extraordinary human achievement, the mobilization of resources and labor on an immense scale to accomplish a shared vision. The pyramids demonstrate the mathematical and engineering capabilities of ancient Egyptians. The precision with which they were constructed, the scale they achieved, and the solutions they developed for engineering problems remain impressive even by modern standards. The pyramids also express something profound about human nature, the desire to create something that will endure, to leave a mark on the world that will outlast the individual. For the pharaohs, the pyramids were expressions of their belief in eternal life and their desire to ensure their own immortality. The resources devoted to pyramid construction, while enormous, were not irrational or unsustainable in the context of Old Kingdom Egypt. The surplus wealth that pyramid construction consumed came from a productive agricultural system, a sophisticated system of taxation and administration, and the loyalty of a population that shared the religious beliefs that motivated the project. Over the centuries, the pyramids have been viewed and interpreted in various ways. Greek and Roman travelers were awed by them and attempted to explain their construction, often incorrectly. Medieval Islamic scholars studied them and sometimes used them as sources of stone. European travelers of the Renaissance and later periods were fascinated by them, proposing various theories about their purpose and construction. In the modern era, the pyramids have become symbols of ancient Egypt in the popular imagination, and often, unfortunately, subjects of pseudo-scientific theories about ancient astronauts, lost knowledge, or mystical properties. These theories, lacking any evidence and often contradicting archaeological understanding, persist despite efforts to educate people about what is actually known about the pyramids. Yet the true story of the pyramids, understood through careful archaeological and historical study, is remarkable enough without embellishment. The actual achievement of ancient Egyptians in constructing these monuments is impressive and worthy of admiration.
The pyramids tell us about how a civilization can organize itself, mobilize resources, and accomplish goals that seem, at first glance, nearly impossible. They tell us about the power of shared belief and common purpose in motivating human effort. They reveal the mathematical, astronomical, and engineering knowledge of ancient Egypt and demonstrate a sophistication of thought and capability that challenges any simple notion of ancient peoples as less intelligent or capable than modern humans.
The pyramids also raise questions about value and priorities. Was it wise for Egypt to devote such enormous resources to royal tombs when those resources might have been used for other purposes? How did the common people view the vast undertaking that consumed their labor? These are not questions that have simple answers, but they are worth considering as we contemplate the pyramids and the civilization that created them.
The Great Pyramid in detail, unlocking its secrets. The Great Pyramid of Khufu deserves special attention as it is the most famous and perhaps the most remarkable pyramid of all. When construction began around 2589 BCE, it stood approximately 146 meters tall, a height that would not be exceeded by any human-made structure until the 14th century spire of the Cathedral of Beauvais in France, and only permanently surpassed with the construction of the Eiffel Tower in 1889. For nearly 4,000 years, the Great Pyramid was not only the tallest structure in Egypt, but the tallest structure in the world. This distinction alone marks it as an extraordinary achievement. The base of the Great Pyramid covers approximately 5.3 hectares, or about 7.5 football fields. The volume of the pyramid is approximately 2.6 million cubic meters, containing about 2.3 million blocks of stone. The engineering precision involved in constructing something this large is evident in the dimensions. The four sides of the base are nearly equal in length, varying by less than 20 centimeters, a remarkable achievement when moving and positioning blocks weighing up to 15 tons. The angles of the four sides, where they meet the base, are nearly equal, suggesting careful planning and measurement. The alignment to the cardinal directions is within a fraction of a degree, demonstrating astronomical observation or surveying knowledge.
The pyramid is constructed with a slight concave depression on each face, meaning that each face is slightly curved inward rather than flat. This subtle design feature may have had structural advantages, distributing weight more effectively, or it may have been intentional, creating a visual effect that changed as sunlight moved across the surface throughout the day. The interior of the Great Pyramid contains 3 known chambers and several passages and shafts. The lowest chamber, called the subterranean or underground chamber, is cut into the bedrock beneath the pyramid and would have been below the water table in ancient times, leading some scholars to question its purpose. It remains unfinished and was likely a failed experiment or a later modification to the original design. The second chamber, called the Queen's Chamber, a misnomer as it was never intended for a queen, is located within the pyramid's interior. Its purpose is uncertain, though it may have served a symbolic or religious function. The third chamber, the King's Chamber, is the largest and contains a granite sarcophagus that once held the body of Khufu. This chamber is lined with granite, which provides greater strength than limestone and better protection for the king's remains. The ceiling of the King's Chamber is particularly notable as it incorporates a series of relieving chambers above it, spaces filled with granite blocks that distribute the weight of millions of tons of stone overhead, preventing the chamber below from being crushed. The passages connecting these chambers are narrow, often requiring visitors to crouch or crawl, suggesting that the pyramid's interior was not designed for ease of access, but rather for security and efficiency of construction. The ascending passage rises at an angle of about 26 degrees, connecting the descending passage to the interior chambers. The Grand Gallery, a remarkable feature, rises from the ascending passage and leads to the king's chamber.
The Grand Gallery is approximately 47 meters long, 8 meters high, and 6 meters wide, making it the largest interior passage in the pyramid. Its corbelled ceiling, constructed of overlapping blocks that create a false arch, demonstrates sophisticated stoneworking techniques. Throughout the pyramid, there are small shafts of unknown purpose, sometimes called air shafts or ventilation shafts, though their exact function remains debated. Some scholars propose they served religious purposes, connecting the burial chamber to the sky, or allowing the pharaoh's soul to exit the pyramid. Others suggest they may have had structural, ventilation, or drainage functions. The construction of the king's chamber from granite suggests that this was the primary burial chamber intended from the beginning. The queen's chamber may have been a later addition or a change in plans, as the axis of the descending passages changes at a particular point, suggesting a modification to the original design plan. The sarcophagus within the king's chamber is a single piece of red granite, weighing approximately 60 tons. It is slightly larger than the opening to the king's chamber, suggesting that it was placed in position during construction, before the walls were completed.
This detail is revealing. It suggests that the builders knew precisely where chambers would be and planned the architecture around them, rather than discovering or modifying chambers after construction began. In recent years, advanced imaging techniques have detected previously unknown voids within the pyramid, suggesting that it may contain additional chambers or passages. These discoveries demonstrate that despite centuries of study, the pyramids still harbor secrets. The construction techniques used in the Great Pyramid are evident from studying other pyramids that were partially completed or in examining the tool marks and evidence left behind. The blocks were shaped using stone tools and copper implements, achieving a degree of precision that allowed blocks to fit together tightly without mortar, as mentioned earlier. The internal blocks, not visible from outside, were less carefully finished than the external blocks, suggesting that builders focused their efforts on visible surfaces while maintaining structural integrity. The precision of the pyramid's dimensions and alignment was achieved using basic tools and mathematical knowledge, not through any special or mysterious means. Egyptian mathematics, while different from modern mathematics, was quite sophisticated, employing geometry and proportional relationships that could be applied to large-scale construction.
As this 4-hour journey through the history and significance of Egyptian pyramids draws toward its close, allow yourself to contemplate what these structures reveal about human civilization and the ancient world. The pyramids stand as perhaps the most enduring human creations, having survived nearly 5,000 years and continuing to fascinate millions of people worldwide. They were constructed without the mechanical advantages available to modern builders, yet they remain impressive to contemporary engineering analysis. The pyramids tell us about the organization and capability of ancient Egypt, a civilization that could command the resources necessary to construct monuments on such a scale, sustain a labor force of perhaps 100,000 people over 20 years, and maintain the administrative systems necessary to coordinate such effort, was far more sophisticated than older theories sometimes allowed. The pyramids revealed the values and beliefs of the ancient Egyptians. The fact that such enormous resources were devoted to tombs and monuments for the dead shows how central the belief in the afterlife was to Egyptian civilization. This was not mere superstition or irrationality. It was a coherent belief system that guided how Egyptians understood death, the divine, and human purpose. The pyramids demonstrate mathematical and engineering knowledge, the precision with which they were constructed, the understanding of geometry and proportion, and the practical solutions developed to engineering challenges all speak to a sophisticated intellectual tradition.
The pyramids raise enduring questions about value, priority, and human nature. Was the investment in pyramid construction rational or excessive? How did ordinary Egyptians view the vast undertaking to which they contributed labor? What drove the pharaohs to seek eternal monuments? What can modern societies learn from ancient Egypt's choices? These questions do not have single correct answers, but they remain worth asking as we contemplate the pyramids and the civilization that created them. The pyramids are, finally, monuments to human ambition, creativity, and endurance. They express the desire to create something that will outlast individual lives, to leave a mark on the world, and to transcend the limitations of mortality. In this respect, the pyramids remain accessible across the millennia, expressing something that resonates with human experience in ancient Egypt and continues to resonate today. As the sun sets over the Egyptian desert, illuminating the pyramid surfaces one final time before the stars emerge, imagine the millions of people who have stood where you are, looking at these monuments, and wondered at the vision and capability of the ancients who built them. The pyramids endure, silent and patient, continuing their vigil across the millennia, reminding us of the achievements, beliefs, and enduring legacy of ancient Egyptian civilization.